Our next session is on how brands are taking a stand on social issues. Joining us are execs from 3 purpose-driven brands: Matt Scanlon, CEO and co-founder at Naadam; Alex Waldman, co-founder and creative director at Universal Standard; Saskia Van Gendt, head of sustainability at Rothys, and moderated by Melissa Duren-Connor, partner at Bett Communications. This session will go deep on how companies are connecting social causes to their brand and how this has helped them attract the right customers. Melissa, I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be talking to these 3 folks. Here at JBC, we have a really big emphasis on working with brands who are not just a great product, but also have some underlying purpose and using their brand as a conduit to another conversation. So having these 3 brands who I'm huge fans of is really exciting. So just to jump right into it and make sure we get to everyone and every question, why don't we have everyone introduce themselves, high level, tell me about your background, the brand, and what is the platform? What is your message that you're using the brand to be a conduit for? Why don't we start with Matt?
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Matt Scanlon. I'm the CEO of Naadam. We started Naadam 6 years ago with one real kind of key concept in mind, and that was cultural preservation. It was an idea that was more or less delivered to us after a serendipitous trip abroad where we were stranded in the middle of the Gobi Desert, living with a family of nomadic herders. And we built a business infused with several kind of key principles. We do everything with humility, integrity, and transparency. And we've extended that value system to our customer. And I guess the long and short of it is we make cashmere sweaters now.
Great. Alex, how about you?
My name is Alex Waldman, and I am the co-founder and creative director of a brand called Universal Standard. We've been around for 5 years, and our mission is inclusivity across the board. We are the world's we are a brand with the world's largest size range, and we don't segregate plus size from straight size. We just make clothes for women. So despite all of that, we actually are not what you might think, which is a body positivity brand. We believe that body positivity is a very personal journey, and that our job is to level the playing field and give access to all people, not just a small percentage of women who now represent only 30% of the population in the United States, but to women regardless of age, size, race, gender identity, sexuality, all of that. It's just all of us as we are is our slogan.
Great. And Saskia.
Hi, I'm Saskia Van Gendt and head of sustainability at Rothys. And Rothys is a company that was really born out of the recognition of the amount of waste and overproduction, especially in footwear and apparel. And initially our founders wanted to create a comfortable shoe, a very wearable shoe, and discovered this problem of waste that now is really integrated into our business model, using recycled materials, designing for longevity, and really thinking about the holistic view of sustainability. I know that social topics is in the title of this presentation, and I think to contextualize the Rothys point of view, we look at sustainability from a very holistic lens. So, you think about environmental, social, governance companies, ESG companies, you can't think about those in isolation. Environmental issues are social issues, and the better that we can improve the environment, we know that the most vulnerable populations will benefit from that. So by integrating sustainability into everything that we do, we really hope to propel our industry, not only on waste, but broader sustainability topics.
Great, thank you. So you guys are all touching on really important pillars, right? From cultural preservation and social responsibility to inclusivity and fashion, and then to sustainability. How these are core to your brand. How do you guys think about the way you communicate to consumers those pillars? Is it at every touch point? Is it closely controlled? Like, how do you use it and leverage it to really storytell, whether it's on social or in emails or your website or whatnot? And this is for anyone who wants to jump in first.
Yeah, happy to take a stab. I think for us, we try and boil our value system down into a personality, and thus it's represented across, I think, a lot of different touch points, but differently across those touch points, right? So like one of the core findings early on for us was that we didn't want to talk about sustainability. I'll just caveat, I don't really like the word sustainability, so I'm using it here for a lack of a better term, but we felt like we wanted to approach it with a sense of humor. We wanted to recognize that, like, at the end of the day, we're just making sweaters and we have to have some fun while doing this. And if we don't make the concept overall accessible and fun, then I think you make it inaccessible, and you make it something for a few people, not the majority of people. So that was like an early finding for us, but we slowly recognized that we didn't always have to be funny, because personality is not always funny. Like sometimes you're serious, sometimes you're angry, sometimes you're frustrated. And so we learned to kind of adopt kind of different tonality across different channels in an effort to examine our value system through the breadth of kind of human experiences. And so we show it all over the place. We have a video that really typifies the personality being funny. And then we'll send emails that are not funny at all, that are very much about the facts. And then sometimes we're angry and we're frustrated. We sent an email this year that said recycled cashmere sucks, because we're frustrated. We think that there's a lot of stuff out there that sucks, and we wanted to make sure people understood where we stood on it. So it is a living collaboration with the customer. It's an ongoing communication that we're constantly learning to adopt and refine against how people respond and what we believe we are.
Yeah, and Alex, I'd love to hear how you guys integrate your messaging, especially because there's a nuance between body positivity and inclusivity, right? So I think a lot of brands who are investing and build their brand on extended sizing or sizing that's for everyone really use that messaging of body positivity, versus yours is a nuance and it's about inclusivity. It's just making great clothes for everyone. How do you really differentiate that?
I think that in all of the categories that all three of us have named, where we sort of are concentrating our efforts, there's a tremendous amount of performative behavior. In other words, people are ticking the boxes. They want to be able to use the language and convince you that they're on the right side of things without actually putting in the effort or putting in the absolute minimum of an effort. So one of the things that we really wanted to do is we wanted to live this truth that we were trying to propagate. And we did that by being very bold, by, using a huge variety of humans in our advertising, in all of our advertising. So when you go to look at our clothing, we don't use a size 10 model to tell you what it's going to look like on a size 23 woman. We actually use a huge variety of bodies, and we do that as a matter of course. We don't explain it. We don't, you'll see a pair of jeans being sold on a size 00, then you'll see a pair of jeans on a size 22, and you have some idea of what they look like on human beings, like in general. So I think it's very important to really be true to what you believe in. And I know this sounds almost hokey, but it really is about that. We do that on every level in all of our communications. And we do that in a way that acknowledges the fact, which I think is really important here. It's easy to tell someone who has been brought up in a world of exclusivity and exclusion that, they should be strong, they should lean into who they are, they should this, that, and the other thing, when in fact, the reason they feel the way they do is because our industries have made them feel that. And it is our responsibility to now step in and try to undo some of the damage that we've done. And certainly for the next generation, you want children, certainly female children, walking out there and seeing themselves represented and feeling like they have the dignity that is allotted them, regardless of how they look or who they represent physically. So it's very, very important for us not to be just checking a box. We've done everything from release a children's book to release huge campaigns to support sometimes controversial companies that Planned Parenthood, where we did risk losing clients.
Sure.
But we really take a stand and we show who we are through every action that we take, from the smallest to the largest.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. So with Rothy, Saskia, how are you guys balancing and embracing that kind of discovery of the issues of supply chain and fashion and waste with also just having a great shoe? Like, I'm sure you probably have to balance that messaging where you want ladies to love the shoe first and then it's an added bonus, or do you lead with sustainability? How do you what's your thought there, and how have you guys approached it?
No, it's a good point, Melissa, about the shoe first has to be a great product. And I believe this to be true across all products that are mission driven. The mission has to support what you're doing, but we don't want to produce a low quality shoe that isn't durable. Durability is a key part of our commitment to sustainability. I was just reading that if you extend the life of a garment or footwear by 9 months, then you can reduce the environmental impacts of that product by 30%. So just extending the shoe, as you know, we make our entire range of apparel and footwear is washable, which kind of feeds back into the longevity of the product. So I think most of our customers are buying the products because of the style, the longevity, the durability of the product. And then the sustainability is very much a discovery. We hear stories about women stopping each other on the street and asking, what shoes you're wearing. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, it's made from recycled water bottles. So I think that it becomes a point of affirmation. That said, as head of sustainability, I'm thinking about how do we push the message out a little bit further and continue to develop more depth into what the customer knows about Rothys. So we're integrating that communication into our product communication. We have very much an integrated approach when it comes to our social platforms and sharing our messages there. And then sometimes we take the opportunity to go a little bit deeper, whether it be an email or a blog on ocean plastic, or going a little bit deeper on some of our materials that we're using. So I think we kind of toggle with how do we continue to build that breadth and excitement and reinforcement of sustainability for a product that we know she loves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess because, obviously our focus here is how do you market brands who have these really important core pillars? We talk a little bit tactically about the way you then integrate it into the way you market the brand and how the consumer reacts to it? Do you see when you lead with these messages, because arguably you all have impeccable product, right? I firmly believe in product first, and then everything else comes after. So we can all say you guys have solid product. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the consumer behaves with your marketing, if it's product first messaging versus pillar first messaging? Because I think a lot of the audience would be curious to understand what is the performance of that? How does the consumer actually react? Do they click through more or less? Do they buy faster? Like, what is that? If you can talk a little bit about it.
Happy to jump in. This was always a really big problem for us early on. I mean, Melissa, you remember like the early days. I was starting Naadam specifically. I didn't know if I should even tell our story, like a story of sustainability, because it distracted people from the product was my biggest fear. And people told us like, the story's like, okay, but like, is the product good? Like, is it the best? And that was really frustrating for me personally. And so what we did early on was we focused on making a really, really good product, but there was still this problem that the product wasn't matched up against the right market. So we found who liked that product. So we started to establish some early product market fit. Still no story, right? We still were like, maybe we shouldn't tell this story. I don't really understand how it ties in. The biggest frustration overall was that I felt early on sustainability was an inaccessible idea for a lot of people. And I know I go back to this, but most of the sustainable things in apparel that I'd seen were more expensive, right? Like you had to pay more for that sustainable process. And it was mostly because processes around sustainability were not efficient yet. They were underfunded. They were not scaled up. And so I think I felt that it was sending the wrong message to consumers. That it was basically saying, you want to save the planet, you got to be rich. Well,
yeah. Let's put a timetable on that for a second. This was what, 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, 5-6 years ago.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. So just so people can understand how far that all is.
Well, I mean, that's really not that long ago. And a lot of people, I'd show them the product and I wanted to tell them the story. And they'd just be like, well, how much does it cost? So all this stuff started to add up. And what I realized was our product needed to tell a story about how being sustainable made it cost less for the consumer, right? If like I could wrap that all up, then it would be easy for people to not only have a product that they could tell a story about, but literally buy into an overarching concept about what sustainability does for them personally. And so it wasn't until we launched the $75 sweater, which, for us became our superhero product. And it was like day and night. We went from, a medium-sized brand to a huge brand selling millions of this specific style. And it was simple. I made a product that cost less than the competition because I had used sustainability and what was at the core of our value system, which was creating equitable relationships and transparency in the supply chain in order to preserve this culture. The outcome was I saw the whole supply chain and said, I'm going to take this, I'm going to remove that, and the product's going to cost less. And I'm going to deliver that value transparently back to the customer, and it stacked up. And it wasn't like, I think that this works. It was like, that is the right components of the value system for the customer. So for us, it was really a unique story, and it was very heuristic. We failed. I mean, again, Melissa, you remember, we failed a lot before we were successful figuring this out. But once it added up, it was clear.
And Saskia, what about for Rothys? And we also obviously want to hear from Alex as well.
Yeah, I think the sustainability messaging is a little bit nuanced because it's very much a part of our brand no matter what. And it was, as I mentioned from the beginning, and we do see different levels of engagement with the information on sustainability in different channels. So for example, some of the Snapchat messaging around sustainability, which might be more of a Gen Z audience, really resonating. We saw a lot of engagement, whereas on some of the other, maybe Instagram or Facebook ads specifically around sustainability, we might see a little bit lower engagement. So I think it's really interesting to think about how we continue to educate, as I said, and share that information with different platforms that we have. But then I think there's also a realization that the consciousness, as Matt was saying, is evolving. There is more of an appetite. We know that sustainability is becoming more forefront as individuals, as consumers. So I think, and I'm hopeful, and this is the eternal optimist in me, that we will continue to see more appetite and more general awareness of the importance of these issues and hold these brands, all brands, accountable for how they respond to the importance of these issues.
Absolutely.
For us, it was a little different. So the problems that were bred in the bone for the part of the industry that we were trying to change were so ran so deep and were so many that we had to pick our battles. So what we started with was actually producing, moving away from the fast fashion model, which is pretty much all that 70% of American women had access to.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, we're not going to use these horrible, like cheap polyester, whatever, you know, they're semi-disposable clothing. The minute you buy it, it's like, if you run too fast, you'll set yourself on fire. You know, like we really wanted to change the way 70% of women, 30%, you know, they have access to absolutely everything. We wanted to do two main things. We wanted to change 70% of women's expectations for what they could viably expect in terms of quality, fabrication, and style. And we wanted to make sure that those women who have everything available to them, that 30%, would be interested in what we had to offer. So that's this desegregation of like, you get this and you get this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a line of clothing that, you know, addresses, you know, the disparaging differences between what has been accessible to various groups of women. And so we started with that. And we're a direct-to-consumer brand. So although we were charging, you know, 1/3 of what you would charge if you were selling in wholesale, it still had a higher price point because it was great, you know, great quality. So we were selling jeans, we still are, at $90, with consumers saying that is outrageous. You know, whereas if you go to the 30%, you know, they're used to spending $200, $300 on a pair of jeans. That's, you know, that's not crazy to them. So there was a lot of breaking of eggs that we had to do in order to make the omelet. And part of that was easing the population that had so many other barriers, that sustainability was so low on their totem pole. You know, like they couldn't dress themselves properly. That takes precedent over, oh, well, how is this garment made? So we started with quality. And then once people started to sort of blossom into the idea of, oh yeah, I can have that. That's a nice, lovely, beautiful thing that is well made, that is not disposable. And yes, it costs maybe a little bit more. Our price points are very, very reasonable, but because the consumer was so not used to it, it was a shock. And then, of course, as we got deeper and deeper into the production process and how everything works and where we manufacture across the world, we started to switch to sustainable fabrics. We always made sure that we worked with factories that had, you know, the best labor laws, that were, you know, they were adhering to the highest standard that was out in the industry. So all of this is like, it's like a bunch of plates that you're running around and you're spinning them on sticks and you're keeping them going. But there is no question, this is something I absolutely have to agree with both Matt and Saskia, there is no question that the quality of your product is what drives the consumer to you. You could not sell just a sustainability story if the product wasn't good enough. I mean, people are buying the product. They're not buying the idea of sustainability. It's like the icing that goes on cake. They both have to be there. And so to us, it's very multi-layered. And our, you know, what we do in the public arena is not just sustainability focused, but it's very, very focused on social issues and dignity and all these other things that sort of have been not available to a vast portion of the population. And we're trying very hard to just kind of shake them awake and say, you should expect these things. You should have access to these things.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about facing any backlash, because I know that happens when brands like you guys have no fear of being who you are and being authentic and partnering with whoever you want, saying what you want to say, how you want to say it, Matt. So Alex, you mentioned Planned Parenthood earlier. We have a client who also partners with them publicly, and we are very lucky to work with founders who do not care about what that percentage of customer will say if they're not happy about those partnerships. They're true to their values. I know Matt, with the recycled cashmere, some of the tone I heard that there were customers who thought it was too aggressive, and I loved it. So I'm just curious how, and I don't know, Rothys, I don't know if there's any, or Saskia, if there's any instance where you guys have gotten negative feedback, but I'm curious, how do you deal with it? Or do you not deal with it at all? And that's okay too. I'm just curious, how do you do? Because when you're dealing with such touchy subjects around the way we dress, the way we live, how we spend money, and then the brand, and then consumers feeling so invested in a brand because of those reasons, and then they experience something they don't align with. How do you guys deal with that? Or how do you react to it? Matt, you're on mute.
Sorry. It's a funny question because we've done a bunch of things that have received backlash. I will say, however, that we haven't received backlash about our processes, about like the things that are like core to our identity, I should say. Again, like I relate a lot of like building a brand to just like being a person, and no one's like said I was ugly before. You know what I mean? Like no one's like attacked the core of our being. Having said that, we have done some things that maybe invited some weird looks. When we first started like marketing Naadam, I needed a way to like get people's attention. And Alex, Saskia, I don't know if you guys know this story, but I found an image of two goats having sex, and I blew them up to like 6 feet by 6 feet, and I put them all over New York City, and I did like guerrilla marketing, and I thought that was really funny, and I wrote on it like I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it, it's inappropriate, but we wrote "Cashmere coming soon," or "This is how you make cashmere, like the best cashmere in the world," something like that. And people were very angry. And I would go by the posters we put out, and there were people writing on market being like, "Screw this brand, like their sex is what, like anything you could throw at us, they were throwing at us." I ignored it, and I still to this day do ignore it as we try and push on topics that make people feel something, that make them remember that like we're pushing the boundaries. And sometimes I push the wrong ones, and again, that's just like, sometimes people's personalities aren't for everyone. I think it's the easiest way to say it.
That's fair. Alex, I'm so curious to hear about the reaction to you working with Planned Parenthood and how you dealt with it or didn't, or.
It's really interesting. I so agree with Matt in terms of like, we think of our brand as a person as well. It's like, if everybody feels the same way about you, you're just not genuine. I mean, it can't happen, right? You have to be yourself. And then whoever like believes in what you're doing is just going to, they're going to be around. So to be perfectly frank with you, when we did the Planned Parenthood, the first push, because we've been supporting them every year since pretty much since we started, we buttoned down the hatches and we thought, okay, here comes the, get ready. There was very, very little from our audience that was like, I don't agree with this. This is terrible. So much less than we anticipated. What did have a huge effect, which we were not expecting, was when I posted an Instagram post that simply said, "Plus size is over." People lost their minds. I mean, people are like, "How dare you? Plus size, where would you be without plus size? This is crazy." And what we're trying to say is like, this is a culture difference. We're trying to make a culture difference, not an apparel product. This is more than just a sweater or a dress. This is about leveling the playing field and saying clothing is for everybody. We don't care. The reason that we have 00 to 40 is because we don't care what your size is. We're not doing you a favor by making clothes that fit you. This is how it always should have been and how it always should be. And it was very interesting to see the reaction, mostly from plus size women who were so ingrained in that plus size space themselves that they could not see past that binary of have and have not.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. I don't know, Saskia, have you guys had to deal with anything, any kind of negativity?
Yeah, and I love the stories that Matt and Alex shared. Just to offer another perspective, I think companies that are taking action, we live in a very communicative time where there's so many chances for our customers to talk to us. And you do have to decide when to respond and how to respond. But it is, and it can be a valuable listening tool. So one thing that comes to mind from 2020, the height of COVID and early days, I think it was April or around that time, we wanted to respond to the need that existed around healthcare workers not having masks and other protective wear. We started making masks in our factory. We're still selling masks today. But in parallel to that, we launched with a kind of one-to-one where if you buy a pair of shoes, then we'll donate 5 masks to the healthcare community. And we did hear a lot of response to that. And people were saying, why would you hold back and wait for a purchase? And we felt that that was the right pushback. And, we were going to donate anyway, but why wait until the purchase had been made? So we ended up changing tack a bit and donating 100,000 masks right away. And so I think it was for us a valuable way to listen and to be responsive to the community, and ended up being the right thing to do.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you guys for that. We only have time for one more question and only one person to answer it. So whoever wants to jump at it, please do. I think it's really important for brands. You guys all launched with your pillar already ingrained, but for brands who maybe didn't but want to start incorporating some kind of social issue that they feel strongly about, that they've evolved into, what is the best way to start introducing that concept and that feels authentic and real? If anyone wants to jump on this and give just some quick advice on how to best do that if you haven't historically already had it.
I can give a really short answer. And
Awesome.
I think
Thank you.
The most important thing is to take immediate action and to have a proof point of how you're taking action. So if you want to integrate sustainability, it's not just enough to say in 5 years, we'll do X, Y, Z. Make an immediate step that shows that your commitment is real, and bring your community along, and bring transparency to your progress towards what you're doing. So I think there has to be a combination of forward thinking and then taking action today.
Absolutely amazing. Well, I am so grateful for you guys for giving us the time to do this. This is such an important topic. So thank you again. And thank you to Commerce Next for having me moderate.
Absolutely. Melissa, thank you for moderating this. Alex, Saskia, Matt, you guys have huge fans. You have to see the chat commentary. People are incredibly impressed with your brands and what you've done. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us. Thanks, Melissa, for moderating.